I asked for 3 turntables. They're like, what, 3? You know, we got 2. You want another one? People who was in the car park didn't appreciate our music too much because they was kept onto the management to ask us to turn it down. This is the wild, wild west, this place, you know.
Your story at Kelly's probably started pre-Lush. You played in, I think it was 1994? You did a Battle of the Giants night, I think, in there, back in the hardcore days. So what do you remember about those nights?
Okay, what I remember. Going there for a start, and it was kind of like this old club. And the old club was backed up against a caravan park. So here's a pub, caravan park, middle of nowhere, I'm in Portrush. And I remember driving through there and I was seeing all these corners with all the like lampposts covered in like mattresses and all sorts of like hay bales and that. So I didn't even know the Northwest 200 even existed even at that time. I wasn't even interested in motorcycles at that point, but I knew that it was turned into a racetrack at some point. But I was there for the music, and then one day I'll get to understand that that is the Northwest 200. But meanwhile, it was very basic, you know. Hotel was there, you know. People knew I was in there. They'd be outside hailing, "Oi, Cox, you know, I'll see you later," and all that sort of stuff. And it was just a pub, you know. You can get yourself a nice pint, pie and mash or chips or whatever you wanted. Very basic, you know. So go inside. It felt like an old discotheque, really, like almost like 70s, like they haven't done a refurb on it for years. It was just kind of like, you know, the backstage was just backstage. It was like a broom cupboard, you know, all the glasses were in there, and there was no carpet, no niceties of it. It was just a back area where people would just go and hang out. When I got to the turntables, I literally had like some sort of table offering. I asked for 3 turntables. They're like, what, 3? You know, we got 2. You want another one? I'm like, yeah, I need another one, because at the time I was playing 3 turntables as a 3-deck wizard and all of that. But we got the 3rd one in. We kind of placed it where more or less where I could use it. And then the sound system was very basic but very loud. I remember a lot of people who was in the car park didn't appreciate our music too much because they was kept onto the management to ask us to turn it down. I remember people that were only outside breaking in, trying to get inside the club as well. It was just like, this is the wild, wild west, this place, you know. But people was inside. It was absolutely chock-a-block. Couldn't get anyone else in there, you know. It was no air conditioning, super hot. And the thing is about it all, you know, all of this adds to your night at Kelly's in Portrush. And it was just absolute chaos in there. Madness, mayhem, and I just feeded off the madness of it all, the energy of it all. You know, people talk about it today with affinity, because if you look at partying today, it's quite subdued. Everyone's got their cameras out, everyone's, you know, dressed really nice. Kelly's was like, I'm in it to get really sweaty. I'm going to really have a great time with my friends and that. The music was beyond itself at the end of the day in the sense of its energy, and there was nothing else like it. I just loved playing there every single time I got the opportunity to play there. And then for me, you know, I'll never forget those times of all the times that I played there. I've seen a few pictures since then of what it was like. And yeah, I mean, I'm sweating now thinking about it. But even at that time, I never dressed to impress. I dressed to sweat, you know, and that was the end of it. You're either in it or you're out. And that's what I remember.
I've seen footage on TikTok actually over the last few days of old school stuff of when you played the Ulster Hall in Belfast in '93 again, yeah. And that was the real hardcore thing. So when Colin then asked you to come back, I think it was 1995, to come back and play one of his resolution nights, and he was sort of changing the sort of music policy in Kelly's at the time, and it was moving away from those sort of happy hardcore sort of sounds to more of the house and techno sounds.
Yeah.
What was it about that time that you wanted to switch the style of music that you were playing at that time?
It wasn't so much about switching, because the thing was about it is, you know, everything progresses anyway. And the music started off with kind of acid house and garage and techno music to start off with, which then eventually turned into the hardcore scene, and the BPMs were going up, and then you had that initial sound. So I've never been scared of the future of music, of where it actually ends up and where it goes. But it gets to a point where a lot of the music was just sounding the same, and it wasn't progressing anywhere, and we've been basically playing it for the last 2 years of where it got to, the kind of the pinnacle of that sound. So you have to kind of turn a corner at some point for the music that was still being made underneath that hardcore sound for where we are today, even after 30 years. And for me, I used to work in a record store at the time, where I was living in Brighton at the time, in Trafalgar Street, and it's called My Price Records. So I was getting all of these records coming through, and I'd be ashamed if I didn't play them, because I really enjoyed the fact that the BPMs were a bit lower. You still had tough techno, but the idea was that you still kept the room interested in the music and the way that it went. So if you was into happy hardcore, if you was into that sound at that particular time, it was the moment of that time. Meanwhile, you had to move on to something that was still going on underneath it all. And I've always been a techno DJ. I've always enjoyed the future sound of music. And so I gravitated to that. And by gravitating to that means that I was basically playing a lot of music from America, from Chicago, from Detroit, from New York City. All this music was just coming out, and there was quite a few people making that music here in the UK as well, but it was all influenced by what was happening in America. So I was pulling all that music in and playing it here in the UK. And Ireland and Scotland, and that was my initial sound, and then eventually I was kind of fusing that sound with the trance sound of Europe initially, and what was going on in the UK. So kind of when my album came out, Factor album, it was a very mixed bag of kind of like that music of the time, but I wanted to also show people that there's, you know, really great music in trance, hard techno, tech house, all sorts of things I was fusing together like I normally do anyway. And then when that album Fact came out, then my music policy of what I was doing kind of started to make sense.
Okay. I mean, in that period in Northern Ireland, there weren't an awful lot of bands or DJs used to come because of the political situation that there was here at the time. Was that a factor for you at all when you were asked to come? I mean, what was your initial feeling when you were asked to come over here for the first time?
My thing was about young people. My thing was about people coming together. And the thing is about it was, there was a lot of stuff going on at that particular time, and every time I used to turn up, I got pulled up by the Guardia. Where you going? What you doing? Who you with? Blah, 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 all the time. But eventually they let us through and let us have our party. And I think it's important, you know, of what was going on around about that time, that I did come here to basically bring people together with my music. And whether, you know, the older generation kind of was upset about it, what could they do, you know? That generation of people that was coming together with the music was such a force that you just couldn't stop it or deny it. Because once you say you can't go to that party, the first thing you're going to do is go to that party. So you know, every time I turned up, that's the only thing everyone wanted to do. Whether you got pulled up by the police or didn't get pulled up by the police, or you had a bad time of getting there because of roadblocks and all this sort of stuff, and bombings at the hotels. And I used to stay at some hotels that got bombed, and then I had to find another hotel, you know what I mean? But it never deterred me from coming, you know, at the end of the day, because I think if it would have been a shame, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't turn up. And that would have been a shame, because of the history of me being here, you know, does stem, you know, back to how it made people feel about, you know, life in general, and what was actually going on at that particular time for us to be where we are now. It's very important. People always ask me about that. You know, why would you go there? You know, things are going on that you can't, you know, be in control of, and you might not even come back. And I was just like, yeah, but I could go to Iraq or Tel Aviv, or, you know, even outside my house. It doesn't matter where it is. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I've got to go. Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, it was important.
I mean, I know people who go to most clubs probably think that the crowd and the atmosphere in their own place was probably the most special. There was a feeling among everybody we spoke to from those early years that because people didn't come, we were so grateful whenever people did, that we decided we wanted to make them want to come back. What was your experience of the crowd in Kelly's and Lush whenever you were playing there?
Oh, it was always endearing, you know. It was kind of like people were so grateful that I left my house, he jumped on a plane, you know, went through all of the police checks and everything, actually turned up and went and then stayed at a pub, you know, no fancy hotel, nothing. And everyone's so grateful about that, you know, that I've always felt like I was always initiated into some sort of family in some ways. And that's how I was made to feel, you know, and it was really nice that I was able to be a part of, you know, the ideal of what it's like to be here and well, there at that particular time. And so I always felt like I was coming home in some ways, you know. It felt like that I was kind of obviously treated in such a way as an artist, but it felt more than that. And that's what I really liked about it. You know, it's very down to earth and very unique and organic in some ways. You know, because it was, I mean, like today now, you know, you're only going to get booked if you've got like 1 million, you know, followers on TikTok or whatever. You know, where we had none of that at all. It was, you kind of got booked on face value of who you are, and the amount of embodiment of work that I was doing, releasing music, making music. Tapes, getting myself out there. It was like, if Carl Cox is coming and he's playing this music, we're going. And that kind of was the kind of word and mouth of what was going on at that particular time. And that was the thing that was about it. I was kind of guaranteed that you was going to have some sort of an electric night if I turned up, and I would make sure that the music that I had would enable you to enjoy that, whether you liked it or not as well, because, you know, some people was like, oh, he's playing too hard, I can't deal with that sound of music. It's like, well, obviously there's other DJs you can choose, and I'm sure that you have an opportunity to go and see them if you want. But for me, it was always, he's playing this music, so we're coming, and that was it. You know, it was always a great understanding between the repertoire between ourselves, you know, by me being that person and the people that used to come to hear me play that music at that time. But I always kind of felt that I was playing the best of what was going on out there. So if it was a Tallow House, I'd be playing the best of that. If it was Chicago Techno, I'd be playing the best of that. I mean, all the time there was always a favourite tune that you play, and the place was just going bananas. So when you heard that record for the first time, it kind of confused you because it was like, what is that?
One of the things about Lush that I enjoyed when I was there was they didn't have it. You know, you'll find clubs that have a very defined music policy. You know, they're very much techno clubs, and they will not entertain the idea of anybody who doesn't fit that sort of profile coming to play there. But Lush would have had yourself. We would have had then real Italian, you know, Italian house guys like Daniel Davoli, and then people like Luke Neville, and then obviously the names like the Seb Fontaines and the Tall Pauls and all those sort of guys. That. It was an accepting sort of crowd in terms of the music. They were there for a good time, and whatever they trusted Carl and the promoters to understand them and know what they wanted to hear. Did you find that with the crowd, that they were very accepting of the music you came to play?
I found them very challenging sometimes, you know, because of the expectations, you know. But I always kind of felt that I was playing the best of what was going on out there. So if it was a Tallow House, I'd be playing the best of that. If it was Chicago Techno, I'd be playing the best of that. If it was something from Peace Frog, from Luke Slater, I'll give him that too. You know, it was always something that I would pull out and then fuse together as a journey of the music and sound. I never really stayed on one sound and then played an hour and a half of that. You know, I always felt the emotion that a DJ should create for your night out based on the music that was coming out at that time. And it was all choices, you know, of what you basically played that make people really stand up and take notice of what your favourite records were. I mean, all the time there was always a favourite tune that you play, and the place would be just going bananas. But that was really cool about it in some ways, because you kind of wait for that favourite tune near the end, and then want to be going through the motions of your music, and you'll play that record and everyone's be like, oh my God, there it is, you know. I mean, the same thing happens today, to be honest, but then it was, you know, it was the unknown, you know. It really was something of which, you know, people would leave down to the DJ to navigate us through the elements of the sound of music that was going on at that time to get to that point of which made sense in the end of the day based on what you really liked and what you really enjoyed. There's certain DJs had their own certain anthems. So, you know, for me, it would always be something like Joey Beltram, Energy Flash or something like that, you know, where some other DJs wouldn't play that, but I would play that. So, you know, so Susie heard that Joey Beltram, and people were like, yeah, that's what we're talking about, you know. we kind of really toyed with the audience in some ways with that. What was your favourite kind of anthemic tune that you would play that would make a difference on that night that people would walk away and then come back? They don't want to, if you're playing again at some point, they don't want to hear that record at some point. So if I was coming back 2 or 3 years in, I would still play that record. You know what I mean? Even sometimes today, I'll still play that record because it's still epic. But it was challenging in some ways because you really wanted to give everyone the best, but not just hang on to the classics all day long, because you still want to kind of like make sure that the music scene goes forward for the future of where we are still today. So that I would always kind of put my first foot out there of what music was around the corner too.
Okay. I mean, one of the things that I'm always amazed at when we talk to people who frequented all these clubs is how much they can remember specific moments in time. From decades ago, they will recall a track. Do you have the sort of same recollection of the reaction that certain tracks would have got whenever you played them, and are able to recall those? Yeah,
I mean, I think the first time I played Strings of Life by Derek May, I mean, it was techno and it was piano, and those two forces collided. So when you heard that record for the first time, it kind of confused you because it was like, what is that? You know what I mean? And even when you hear it today, you still go, oh my God, that's just incredible. And there was plenty of records that had that kind of elements in the music, but it was something of which you knew you would like the touch paper on at that particular time, and then it would just fire off like a rocket into the stratosphere. And Strings of Life was definitely one of them. So it was one of those records where I'll just wait and then drop that record, and then you get all the bar staff, security, everyone just jumping up and down, going mad, and just enjoying the moment of that. And the heat would just rise. Everyone was just so into it. And for me, I've always tried to find those moments in tracks that would basically set the dance floor on fire.
Okay, there was one in particular. I put a post into one of the Facebook groups of all the old Lush members and asked them what was their favourite 10 minutes in Lush ever. And 3 or 4 people came back and said it was one of the Easter Mondays you played, and towards the end of the set you played an Alloy Mental track by Phil Kieran.
Oh, right.
And 3 or 4 people said they'd never seen such craziness in the place in all their life. And part of that was due to the fact that it's Phil Kieran, and we like supporting our own. So whenever people who were in the know, the music kids who were there, sort of recognised the Phil Kieran track and thought Coxie's playing Phil Kieran, right. The place went crazy. Do you have any recollection of that at all?
Yes and no, because there was so much music and so many moments, that defined the scene. That if you showed me that I played it, and I'd be like, right, I remember that. If you can imagine the amount of events that I've done since then to present day, to try and pinpoint that would be very difficult, because of, time has passed so much, and so many events that I've done and music that I've played. It's just incredible, to me to be able to sit here after 30 years and then try and recollect a certain moment of which I haven't forgotten about, but it's in there somewhere, of the moment, of course. But obviously I remember the events very, very much with affinity, but the actual pinpointing of certain tracks, there was just so many of them that I can't remember them all, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, you've played a lot in Northern Ireland outside of the Kellys and Lush experience. You've played Shine, you've played lots of other places. What would you say generally about the Northern Ireland crowds that you've played to, and how is it different, or how would you categorise the crowd reaction that you've had over the course?
I think in the Northern Ireland crowds, it's kind of like, you can go to Ibiza, you can go to Torremolinos, you can go to Greece, you can go to Italy, you can go anywhere. The thing is that when you're on home soil, and when you got your friends around you, and when you got your favourite DJs come to town, it doesn't matter where you are. It makes you feel like you're on holiday, having the best time of your life, right here in Northern Ireland, right there, right at this club, right at this moment, right now. So it doesn't matter where I've been. Coming here was always very special because of how people embraced everything at that particular time. The club was always packed until the very, very end, and people still wouldn't leave. We played the last record, lights are on, and people were just like, we can't just leave. one more record. You know, it was the intensity on that is just so amazing. That I kind of miss those days in some ways, where now we don't really have those late night events anymore in such a way where everything is kind of like done by 11 and you know you have your daytime party. I mean, things have changed so much since then. You can kind of feel the crowd have had enough. They've been there. They've got Instagram moments and they're starting to leave to go home. I always felt that I was playing my best music in the last hour of the night. You know, I always played like at least between 2 and 3 hour sets at least. I never came to do a 1 hour set. No way. You had to play pretty well here in Northern Ireland. If you played rubbish, then they let you know about it too. But you know, when it's leaving the club at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2:30, you know you've been out. You're getting kicked out and it's still pitch black and it's freezing. I don't even know I'm going to get home and that sort of stuff. But you had your night out. But people wouldn't leave the club. You know, even when you played your last record, and you still got an abundance of music to still play. But that's it. You're done. And that's a kind of, when you're an entertainer or such, and you leave people on a high, they want to come back again for that high again. So it wasn't like these days. Sometimes if you push a club till 12, 1 o'clock or 2, you can kind of feel the crowd have had enough. They've been there. They've got Instagram moments and they're starting to leave to go home. Where it's not done, you know, we're still in it, and that was always great. I always felt that I was playing my best music in the last hour of the night, where I could really dig into the crate and really pull out some amazing music. And people, if they're still there at that particular moment, you got them, you know, to take that journey and that ride, and you can just push them as much as you can until the close. So I was always really kind of like, you know, the first couple of hours, play a few records they like and a few records I like, and everyone's going to the air and everyone's having a good time. But if they're still there at that particular time, then you can start to drive it home. And for me, that was always the best times.
I mean, the licensing laws here were part of the reason for that, in the sense that, you know, it was 1:30, 2 o'clock you were done, whereas over and even in GB, you know, clubs were midnight until 7 a.m. So people arrived and left at different times, whereas over here you had, everybody was there from 9 o'clock and they knew they were finished at 1:30, so everybody arrived at the same time and everybody left at the same time. Yeah. And it just felt like all this pent-up energy because, you know, at 1:30 we're done, right? Yes. So, you know, let's make the most of this, and that's what it felt like. Participating in it, did you get that sense whenever you were playing it? Yeah, you could really feel that. You know, it was. You know, I always played like at least between 2 and 3 hour sets at least. I never came to do a 1 hour set. No way. You know, I wanted to take people on that initial journey of my music all of the time. So most of the time, you would have a resident DJ, maybe 2 resident DJs, and then me play. That was it. It wasn't like a plethora of DJs, and then I'm going to do an hour at the end, sort of thing, to keep the crowd in there. You know, if I was coming to play in Northern Ireland, and then I've got to take the room, and that's it. You know, wherever which way it all goes. So people know that they've had a good time by what they've hung out for, what they paid for, what they're looking forward to. And that, for me, was always the challenge of it all, you know, of what I did with that at the end of the day. But I always rose to the challenge at the end of the day, and I've always felt that you had to play pretty well here in Northern Ireland. If you played rubbish, then they let you know about it too. The internet, social media, it's just made people so lazy now. You know, it's kind of like they don't want to get booked on the premise of working hard. Find an event space, creating something for yourself, the music, the idea, your fan base, all of this which we used to do. We don't do any of that anymore. When I started Space in Ibiza, that was a Tuesday night which never happened. It was a dead night. Okay. One of the final things I wanted to ask you about, you know, the idea for this documentary came about because Lush closed its doors, obviously influenced by COVID in 2020. And there was a sense that, you know, it's over, okay? And then the idea for this documentary came out because the more people we spoke to, we thought it's not over actually, you know, because the legacy of it lives on. And, you know, I'm sit here as a regular in Lush for 20 odd years, and my son and my daughter are going to emerge later to hear, to hear you. So you know, it's beyond the bricks and mortar of the place. But that weekly club experience where you had people who, it was a weekly pilgrimage, and it didn't matter who was playing, they were there every week. It's gone. The scene's moved away from that now, and it seems to be more big events. Why do you think that happened, or how important do you think that experience of that weekly club night event was. I mean, you look at some of the lineups that people had in Cream and Ministry of Sound, and even when you look at the old Lush flyers, and you thought 5 weeks in the month, and I can't miss any of those now.
Yeah.
You know, that it really has gone, that hasn't it? That weekly club night experience.
Yeah, it is a real shame, you know, because all the time I did residencies in clubs, it started off with, you know, a little place like this, you know, and 70 people would come along and they'd hear your music and they really enjoy it, and then that got too small, then went to another place was a little bit bigger, and then that got too small and went to another place that got a little bit bigger. I just feel that you've kind of run out of the promoters who are people who feel the music, feel the energy, know what the public would like to have, and have that weekly experience of what makes sense, you know, in the end of the day, based on all this music that's available to the DJs to play it. But also, I think, you know, the internet, social media, it's just made people so lazy now. You know, it's kind of like they don't want to get booked on the premise of working hard. You know, going from club to club, going from wine bar to wine bar, finding an event space, creating something for yourself, the music, the idea, your fan base, all of this which we used to do. We don't do any of that anymore. You know, it's all down to, again, you know, Instagram likes, TikTok likes, all this sort of stuff. You know, you make a record that appeals to a lot of people. They want to see you play that music, and then you know, either go to Tomorrowland, you can go to Time Warp, you can go to all these places, and that's where you're only going to see that person. Where it'd be nice to see that person in your local area and support that person at that particular time. All of it's gone in that way. You know, I still do play smaller venues, you know, because I really want people to still understand where I came from. But of course my public's waiting in all the big events as well, so I end up doing those too. I'll try and have a balance between all of that. But I did my hard work. I did my hard yards. I know what it's like to tread the boards, and with that, you know, try and leave some sort of idea that it never came easy by what I'm doing still today, on expectations on what my performance is still like in the end. But my art of performance was truly based on creating something from nothing. You know, when I started Space in Ibiza, that was a Tuesday night, which never happened. It was a dead night. And then I was like, right, I'm going to go in and I'm going to promote the fact that I'm going to be playing here every week. I hope it lasts. You know what I mean? You know, 16 years later, it worked really, really well. And I came from another residency of a club that I used to do in London called Ultimate Bass, a club called Velvet Underground in London. It's Charing Cross Road. And that was only for 220 people. That's it, maximum. And you get one more person and you really knew about it. But I did that for 7 years. So I know what it's like, what that was like to feel that we was creating a club night, something that you can go to weekly, and you know, obviously invite other DJs to come and play their music, their releases, what they were about, and just have that idea of what you was giving people as something of which you believed in. You believed in that music, that sound, which way it was going, whether it be hip hop or drum and bass, whether it be jazz, funk, soul, or disco. At the end of the day, you got to understand why you're doing it in the first place. If it's just to make money, then yeah, you know, find someone that can back you and then create another festival. But does it have any real feel to it? No, not really. You know, because it's a thing that is marketed in such a way that you have to fall into the trap of playing exactly the same music that DJ is playing, just so you can get the same embodiment of attention by what you're doing. At the end of the day, to be able to justify you being booked. So the framework has changed a lot, and I've seen that framework, as you can imagine, change from what it was to where it is now. I still try and go back to what it was and get people to understand I'm not just here for the beer. I'm just not here to get paid. I actually want to be here to share the love of music still. After all, that's what I've always been about. So, you know, obviously there's a self-worth to who I am, and I think that's clear. But the thing is, people, you know, I'm just not here. You know, I'm going to play here, and I'm going to get my private jet and play another 2 more events this weekend. This is it. I'm done, and I'm going to make the very best of it. So yeah, the kind of infrastructure has moved along so much, and I blame the internet, to be honest with you, for that, because now people kind of go, well, I don't really need to do that anymore. I just need to, you know, make sure that I have someone that can create good content, that people can see that I'm having a really good time with the music that I'm making, and hopefully, you know, by that idea of marketing that works for me, and then they can basically get booked on that premise, and then just head towards all the festivals. which there is plenty of, you know, on a worldwide basis. So it's kind of worked in that way for the future of what's happened for the now generation to step into that mold. But for me, it's always been something of which I would like to see people still work a little bit harder at it, and then they appreciate once they do get to that point is that they understand and respect the position that they're in to be able to continue, you know, doing what they're doing after so many years. I mean, for me, I'm talking to you now as someone that's been involved in the music industry for 40 years or over 40 years, but with this music for 30 years. So the DJ is basically now, you know, 22, 23 years old, and they're now having a career. You know, I like to see them in the next 30 years' time to see if they still feel the same about what they're doing. I have to say, probably it won't last for a lot of them because it's work. At the end of the day, this is not some sort of jolly holiday that I don't think they should be having. I think, you know, when you're in a position like this, it has to be about the music first, more than anything else, for people to understand the position that you're in, for be able to have that longevity in your career.
Okay, I mean, one last question to wrap up then. I mean, thinking about the times, the experiences you had playing in Lush, could you give us like a quick summary of 3 words that you would use to sum up the crowd and the experience?
Well, it was always exciting. It was always there was always a lot of passion, and there was always a lot of I would say anticipation. You know, people almost couldn't breathe. What's gonna happen? You know, and then all of a sudden, when you give it to them, the roar of the excitement of all of that was just endearing. I just wanted to give a next record more, the another record more, just more and more of it all of the time. And with those 3 words, I think that kind of summed up, you know, my whole being of being where I am now with the fan base that I still have after all these years, and everything that we spoke about. I'm going to have to go and do pretty soon as well. So I have to go and back that up, you know. But yeah, I'm very happy to be back, and this event for me, Emergence, been a long time coming.